But first, after months of turmoil, Thailand's Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra has finally agreed to meet her country's election commission to decide whether this weekend's general election will go ahead or not. The senior Thai ministers insist the government plans to press ahead with the poll on Sunday. But after a leading anti-government protester was shot dead in Bangkok and mass demonstrations prevented hundreds of thousands of early voters casting their ballots, could the Prime Minister be forced to rethink? Abhisit Vejjajiva is opposition leader and Thailand's former Prime Minister. Abhisit Vejjajiva, good to be talking to you again.
It's good to be talking to you too.
The protests in Bangkok have taken a grim and indeed tragic turn. Isn't it time for the demonstrators to clear the streets, to let the democratic processes take their course?
I think the best course for the country now is for the Prime Minister to talk to the Election Commission. I think they have clearly reported to her on several occasions that the February the 2nd elections cannot be held in a free and fair manner according to the Constitution, and that it's best to have a dialogue or consultations as to how we could have elections that would be accepted by all sides. I'm surprised that after the court ruling on Friday, the Prime Minister has left it rather late. I mean, she's going to meet with the Election Commission tomorrow, and I felt that if she had met the Election Commission on Saturday and maybe find a solution, the tragedy on Sunday wouldn't have happened.
As you say, Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra has finally, and reluctantly I might add, agreed to meet the Election Commission. What do you think that meeting's likely to produce?
Well, I think a decision has to be made, whether in principle the Prime Minister feels that it would make sense to set a new date for elections. If she does that, I think the next step, logical step, would be for all political parties as well as civil society to come together and reach some kind of roadmap by which we can achieve both reforms and elections in a reasonable frame of time. But if she decides that she would want to go ahead with February the 2nd anyway, then obviously the confrontation will continue.
But why is it that protesters should be able to stop the democratic process? Why should people be stopped from voting if that's what they want to do, if the polling booths are open as they are?
Because from the protesters' point of view, they feel that an election is not the answer to the problems of the country, which have suffered from corruption and from abuses of power by the current government before it became a caretaker government. They want to see some fundamental reforms that will ensure that what has happened in the last 4 or 5 months would not happen again.
And do you agree with the protesters that elections are not the solution?
I certainly feel that the February 2nd elections will not give us the right answers. And it's not just my own view. I think it's a view that has been expressed not just by the protesters, but by business organizations, leading members of civil society, academics, and most significantly, I think the Election Commission itself.
It does sound a little bit like sour grapes, if I can put it that way. You were installed as Prime Minister as a consequence of decisions in which the Election Commission intervened a few years ago. You were unable to turn that into a mandate from the voters. Why wouldn't the world just simply see this as history repeating itself?
I don't think that's the right way of summing up what happened. They were involved in election fraud and they got punished. A new vote was taken in Parliament. I was installed as Prime Minister by a vote in Parliament. I dissolved the House. They won the elections and we accepted the results. That's why they have had 2 years of running this country without any significant problems to political stability. The problem came when they tried to pass an amnesty bill, which we had warned them about, that they shouldn't do. It was an attempt to whitewash crimes, including corruption, by the Prime Minister's brother. That's not something that can be accepted by the public. And basically that led to the loss of trust in politicians and the political process. And that's why the country is in the situation we're in now.
You've warned that the Prime Minister could face impeachment if the election does go ahead on Sunday. How is that when Yingluck Shinawatra is the democratically elected leader of your country and as Prime Minister has the right to call an election?
An elected person does not have the right to break the law. The fact of the matter is the Election Commission, which is tasked with running the elections and overseeing the elections, had reported to her several times that going ahead with February the 2nd elections could be unconstitutional. She is in the position to fix that, and if she refuses to do so, it seems that she intends to push for something that is unconstitutional. That's grounds for impeachment.
Hasn't the Election Commission also said that the election, while it could be delayed, that is not absolutely necessary? In those circumstances, why would a Prime Minister who thinks she has a chance of winning an election not go ahead?
I don't think the Election Commission has said that. What the Election Commission has said is that it does not have the power to set a new date for elections. And if the Prime Minister does not do that, it has the job of running the elections. And it says that it will do so knowing full well that it cannot do so in a free and fair manner according to the Constitution.
What about the long-term implications of putting off this election for the future of Thai democracy? Wouldn't it leave the way open for any future Prime Minister to postpone a poll simply because he or she thinks their government might lose on a whim, in effect?
No, because the view that would be submitted firmly rests with the Election Commission. And that's part of the verdict of the court as well. And it makes sense because they're the ones that are running the elections. They don't have a direct stake in whoever wins the elections. So it's the opinion of the Election Commission whether an election can be held in a free and fair manner. It has nothing to do with the person running in the elections.
Now, if the election were to proceed on Sunday, you'd not be a candidate. There'd be no quorum in any subsequent parliament as a consequence of your boycott. What would happen then, do you think?
Well, it's more confrontation. And it just raises the point that what is the objective of holding an election when you cannot fill a quorum for parliament?
This whole episode does not reflect very well on the political class in Bangkok, government or opposition. When, if ever, will Thailand's political leaders of all stripes, when will they come together for the good of the country and for its future? When is the good of the country going to come first?
Well, two things. I think Prime Minister Yingluck had a golden opportunity to pull the country out of this cycle. All she had to do was stay off the issue of amnesty, and we would have had maybe 4 years of her completing the term and normal elections being held. We warned her about that. Everybody warned her about that, but she decided to push ahead. So back into this cycle of conflict. And this conflict will never go away until former Prime Minister Thaksin accepts the verdict of the court and accepts the law, because he will be trying through various means to try to whitewash what he's done wrong, to try to overturn the verdict of the court, and there will be a significant portion of the population that will not accept that.
Abhisit Vejjajiva, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.